Hi everybody, welcome. I know that you had desired to learn about the pitfalls of being CMMC compliant, so boy, today is going to deliver. Have no fear. All right, first and foremost, I want to start by not the pitfalls. Well, everybody's here. How many of you have had to go through some form of compliance program in your business? Yeah? Was it exciting? Was it fun? Was it thrilling? It sucked. Most of the time, these programs are built by somebody who doesn't know anything about your business, and they've come up with some way to make accountants get a lot more money and auditors to come in forever. But I would say in the case of CMMC that this is not what has occurred. A lot of what is around CMMC is focused on cybersecurity, bringing the manufacturing base, the supplier base, up to a level of security that just doesn't exist today. When we say cybersecurity, we're generally thinking these large companies that have lots of people and employees, and they're trying to do these things. What we're concerned with in the country right now, especially in the defense industry base, is how do we bring these small companies, especially small manufacturers, into a realm of compliance without costing them more money than what they make in a year, right? So it's kind of a challenge because security does cost, but nevertheless, no security costs even more, right? In terms of your data loss and so on. So out of the gate, CMMC, while daunting when you look at it with no understanding around what to do and how to do it, you kind of want to ignore it. But in reality, it is one of the few times I would say that the government's put a program together that's actually going to benefit the business. All right, so we want to talk about what are the pitfalls that we're seeing in the industry around becoming CMMC compliant. All right, and one of those is, what is it about? You might have heard the term CUI or CUI, which I can't get my head around calling something that, but it sounds like cooties, something like that. But anyway, CUI or CUI is controlled and classified information. And that is what CMMC is about. Don't be brought into the thought of, it's about my IT network, or it's about my backbone infrastructure and this, that, and the other. The scope of what CMMC is about is the protection of CUI data. We don't want that data to get into the hands of bad actors, okay? Now, what happens to be in any business, even if you're not a government supplier, CUI data kind of is akin to your intellectual property, right? We have a customer that we're working with is in the space of agriculture, and that's all about the recipe, what they're building in their fertilizer. Well, if somebody were to steal that, their company's done. So Dr. Pepper's recipe, Kentucky Fried Chicken, all these things, general business, the recipes, the things that are there are critical to secure. And in the government, this is called CUI. All right. Now, the challenge that you end up getting, especially if you bring in consultants, which we'll talk about next, is both overscoping and underscoping, right? A lot of times the idea is, well, let's just put everything in CUI because that way we'll be secure. And what that ends up being is a huge mess of a lot of effort and a lot of cost to accomplish what you need to do. So here's the way to think about it. If the top of the pyramid is CUI, the next step of, well, what do I need to do about it? My first step is limit who has access. Your whole goal should be, if you need access, great. But if you don't, or if we can move it to something else and limit, then even better. So if you can limit the scope of where CUI is accessed, who is accessing it, where it's being used, the better for your business. However, underscoping can be detrimental, right? At the end of the process, when you get ready for CUI or for CMMC compliance and you have the auditor come in and you have not accomplished full scope of everything you're doing and you fail, you get to pay the same amount of money after you fix it to have them come back and audit again. So whatever that price is, failure is expensive, right? Because they got to come back, it's going to be delayed, so on and so on. So what you want to do is, as I said, Again, limit where it's accessible, but everywhere that it's accessible needs to be secured. Thus, make sure the scope is correct. And I wish I could say I'm going to have a slide on the folks that are out here trying to help you with it. Not all of them know what they're talking about either. So I ran into a gentleman who said, well, manufacturing, the machines are not in scope. And he's absolutely correct. The physical machines, the robots, those cutting the parts, are not in scope, meaning they do not have to meet the CMMC compliance. However, the file that goes to the machine that builds the part is. And so he had already gone through, as a CMMC consultant, multiple companies and did not have the files on the machines in scope. So I think that'll be an interesting life when the audit occurs and things go on there. So understand, just use the rule I said. Wherever the CUI is, whoever accesses it, that is in scope. Okay? I touched on this a little bit, but manufacturing workflows are not even conceived of in many cases. When you ask the question, well, how are we controlling CUI data as the build file that goes to a machine? And you look at people and they'll stare at you, right? And if you get with a consultant, well, I'm already jumping ahead to the next slide, ask them that question. What is the recommendation? How is this going to be controlled? And if they don't have an answer, get a new consultant. Okay. I'd start with that process in general. And then finally, people. Again, who's accessing, right? If they touch it anywhere in the process, you either have to have a documented control procedure and process and verification, or you need technology that removes their ability to be touching it and seeing it and running it. So like I said at the beginning, limit the access as much as possible. This is going to help guarantee your success at CMMC compliance. Okay, I'm going to kind of rag on a favorite group of mine. These are good people. Many of them are nice people. It's all good. But whenever the government creates a program, it seems that they just come out of the woodwork. There are experts everywhere, right? And notice, we didn't introduce me as an expert. Thank you so much. Okay, not an expert. Don't want to be an expert. All right, but there's CMMC folks that are here to help, right? And there's a lot of pitfalls with these folks. I've already touched on a few that you want to be well-versed. We've had some articles SME has produced about this themselves, right? So trying to help you guys as well if you can read those and go through them. But one of the first pitfalls that you want to see and understand is a consultant that says, we've got templates for you to allow you to do what you need to documentation-wise for CMMC. That's code speak for, I created a Word template, I'm going to charge you a lot for it, but you don't have a clue how to fill it in or what to do with it, right? It's like taxes, okay? How many of us love doing taxes, right? Well, many of us use TurboTax or someone else to do taxes. Why? Because we're worried about, did I do it right? Did I fill everything in the right place? Did I put the numbers correctly so it's adding up? Because guess what happens? I pay the price if it's wrong, right? So I kind of want to go to somebody or something that's doing that for me because I don't understand the tax code. Well, think about this as well. You get a template, does that do anything to help you understand where and what and how or any of those things? It's not doing anything for you. So it's a common thing that I see in the consultant world out there is we provide you with templates. Turn and run. Just because policies exist, so let's say you do create the policies, you need to be aware of the policies have to be tested, have to be verified, have to be auditable, right? Evidence has to exist that you've done those. So you want to do that as well. A lot of times they just create a policy and say you're good to go. No, sir. The auditor is going to come in and say, show me the evidence of that policy, okay? Third issue. If they come and they say, okay, we're going to bill you, we're going to give you 20 hours or 40 hours. Great. That's wonderful. I love 40 hours. Doing what? What are you going to accomplish in that time frame? That speaks to kind of one of the other elements. No guaranteed scope, schedule, or outcome. If you're dealing with somebody in a consultant group that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be ready for compliance in this kind of a time frame, and if it doesn't work there, it's on them to make sure that you are. Ask any one of them that kind of a question, right? Just don't hire a consultant that has open-ended hours, because what that means is you'll have a non-ending schedule and you'll have a non-ending drain of your dollars to get to where you need to be. Okay. One of the words that we use and other words talk about an enclave. The government's kind of coined that term with the Army when they came out with this. It said, if you use an enclave, you get a good percentage of the way to CMMC compliance readiness. Okay? And what it's intended to do as an enclave is provide you with the technology that meets X amount of percentage of the compliance requirements. Okay? Now, the problem with that is many times the people telling you that don't know how much is being met. So when you say, how many elements of CMMC 2.0 are covered by your enclave? That's a question you need to ask, right? Is it 70%, 80%, 50%? Don't know. But you're on the hook for everything that's not being made. So you need to understand that, just using the term enclave doesn't mean things are good to go. And then finally, if there's no transfer of knowledge, if there is no concept, let's say it's beyond templates, but now there are policies and procedures, you can't let them out the door without all of that transferring to you, because you're ultimately the ones that have to answer for it. So those are, frankly, I could keep going on and on, but you guys are already bored with it, so we'll move on. All right. Here's another beauty. It's getting less and less, but anybody notice how, hey, we're in the cloud, seems to be an answer when you say, hey, are you secure? What in the world does that have to do with being secure, right? I mean, the cloud just means you moved it to somebody else and you have less controls, right? You want to be very cautious of what technology you're being told. You need to know exactly what that is. And is it, again, providing the elements that we talked about? This gets to another element of CMMC. It's called, what is your shared responsibility matrix? And the shared responsibility matrix says, okay, these are the things that me as the enclave or the systems technology providers is checking. These are the ones that we have to do together, and these are the ones that the customer owns. You need to make sure that is very well defined and understood, because the auditor is going to look at that first. They're going to come in and say, okay, who and what is this? This is giving me my proof. This is giving me the ability to understand it. The tools that you use sometimes have to be then configured and extended for compliance. Here's the other thing. If somebody comes back to you and says, I've got the technology, I've got the cybersecurity solution, my solution does everything you need to do, know for a fact that they don't have a clue what they're talking about. There is no one piece of technology that is covering all the elements required by CMMC. This is why an enclave is typically brought up, because the right type of tools, and not everyone's equal, not every cybersecurity solution, network monitoring system, IT solution is the same. So you still have to be very, do your due diligence and make sure that's covered. Again, we talked about this before, but manufacturing is rarely covered. The fact that all of your machines, some of them might be manual, some of them might have digital connectivity, but they're not. Cousin Earl is somebody that comes in on the weekends and cuts parts for you. These things are not allowed. These things cannot be gone forward with. A lot of changes, from a manufacturing perspective, need to be brought up to the fact that security is something the whole company needs to do, and manufacturing isn't on its own. Okay? All right, then finally, the evidence is not something that you can ignore. This is what you have to make sure is being collected, is being processed, is being done on a regular basis to prove to yourself more than anyone else that you have got your system and environments are secure. Okay. So touching on manufacturing at a little bit more. The boundary, as we mentioned, is the machines. Okay, so understand you will have machines that have no ability to be on compliance on their own. A physical lathe that you use to cut a part is not going to be digitally controlled and managed. But there are ways in which to bring that in scope into compliance as well. If you're talking with someone that can manage yourself in the floor. The build files that go to the machine are in scope, as I talked about before. Do not get confused just because the machine is running and it needs a build file. The build file itself is in control. The more that file is exposed, the longer that is to the more people, the more at risk you are. So you want to get into a case where that is never manually managed. You want that file digitally controlled to the machine. You want it digitally removed from the machine, okay? Because while it's on the machine, it's exposed. And therefore you have to think about other things. Physical security. Where is the machine? Are there specific machines that are allowed to build these specific parts? Do I have physical controls around them? In other words, a card reader or something for a person to get in? Have I put a camera or other sensors in the environment so I could see who came in or came by the machine while I was cutting the part? All right. Your workflows. Again, back to the CUI. Where is the CUI? Where is it exposed? Where is it being used? The other thing we deal with in manufacturing is the OT network that's connecting the machines needs to be completely isolated from the standard network environment. I had somebody that was talking about, well, we got a template for our operator and they're entering and they're seeing statistics data and they're like, where's that data coming from? Well, it's coming right from the OT network. And that tablet's on an external Wi-Fi capable environment. Like you just expose everything, okay? So it seemed convenient, it seemed like a good idea, but it was a very bad idea, right? So the machines themselves, if they're on a network, the OT network needs to be completely isolated, physically secured, the routers, the switches, anything that are going into that, so that you have the controls and processes to demonstrate the security that you're using. And I already talked about the files not persisting. So in manufacturing, there is still many people that take the build files on a USB drive and put the USB drive in the machine, because all the machines might not have network connections, but they all have USB drives, it seems. And so this is how files are being moved around. And I think we all know that that's not a very secure process. So, as I said, make sure that that is digitally controlled. All right. Wanted to touch on this. It's something that we've even seen here at the show and had conversations. You say, I don't need to be CMMC compliant. I don't supply the government. That's awesome. Maybe you want to, and we'll talk about how you can get there, and it's going to be, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of changes going on to be a supplier to the government. However, if you supply anything to any person or company that supplies to the federal government, you have to be what's called CRM compliant. Now, it's not as daunting as CMMC2, and it doesn't require an auditor to come in. It's self-attestation, but it does require proof. They will require you to submit information that shows that you're doing what you're doing. But this is something we've come to see that most folks don't even know about or think that they're a part of it. If I'm not supplying the defense industry, I don't need to do this. Well, if you're supplying somebody that is, you do. And so this is a critical element that many of the integrators and other folks out there are now sending letters to their suppliers, and a lot of suppliers are looking at it and going, what in the world is this? Why am I having to do this? Well, it's a mandatory requirement. Now, you could say, well, I don't want to do that and get out of the business. That's fine, right? You don't have to supply to them, but trust me, in this case, it's even less daunting to get through this process than it is in CMMC2. And the whole key, again, like I said at the very beginning, it's to bring suppliers up to a level of security, up to a level of control that we really need to be, that we frankly have been ignoring for a while. It's been a kind of case of, yeah, security is important, but it's money, and I got to pay IT, and I got to do this and that, and it won't happen to me, right? I'm not going to get attacked. None of my data will get exposed, right? Just understand and know, have any of you heard of the Google autonomous car situation? Everybody knows that? Do you know a guy that worked on the program, took all of the data from it, went and started an autonomous truck company, even got financing, investment for it, started building it all until everybody realized that he stole all of it from Google, right? And so multiple years went by, right? So if Google isn't putting the attention to this as we should, we've got a problem. We need to do stuff around that. All right. I think that was it. So Q&A, right? Questions?
Rob, thank you. Couple of questions. One, so if you are a supplier touching derived data, not CUI data, you don't need to be, it sounds like you don't need CMMC, but you need CRM. Is that the right assumption?
Thanks for bringing that up. I need to talk about that. CUI data, especially manufacturing, if I was to do a CUI build of a F-18 gear assembly, right? The data that's being collected on that build is also CUI data. It needs to be secured. But your question is if it's adjacent and it's not CUI or it's not the elements of CUI. No, you don't need CMMC compliance because you're not looking at CUI, right? So again, what is CUI is the boundary, right? But I did want to say that a lot of times the boundary is confusing because it might have started as CUI, but something is generated from it that is CUI data as well. So you got to be conscientious of that. That was the first question. Oh, SCRM. SCRM is all about, isn't the same concept of CUI, right? It's whether or not you're a supplier. So if you're a supplier in any vein to anybody that's supplying the Defense Department, you need to be SCRM. Okay, good question. Second question? Don't be shy. I know you know CMMC. This is exciting stuff. No?
Rob, I do have one question, and I legitimately had to look it up as you were going through. What does CMMC stand for?
Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Don't remember that. Just CMMC is good. Like every other government acronym.
Exactly. All right. Well, Rob, thank you for your time here this morning, and we have another question.
Sorry, clearly a topic that's top of mind. To what extent, Rob, are you hearing about CMMC and related topics in the context of model-based engineering and the digital threat, and topics like characteristic traceability and the DoD mandates related to that?
So I'm going to answer that in a broad general question, which is CMMC is becoming just in general a boiling point because traditionally when the government creates a requirement, everybody says, okay, and they ignore it. And everybody has, as you should, except in October, they came out and said, this is mandatory and you have to be there by next October. And by the way, if you are an existing contractor, you have till November to prove that you have met your requirements. And the Department of Justice is now going to prosecute anybody who isn't. And so they started prosecuting companies, started prosecuting individuals, and everybody's going, well, we'll use the words, holy cow, this is real. So it's coming up and everybody's kind of looking around going, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? And how do I need to do it? And so I would say, even regardless of the other mandates and the other elements you've talked about, just CMMC by itself is just kind of at a point of everybody looking around going, what am I going to do?